Genetic Apex has been out for some time now, and many of us have been waiting for the next A2 set to release, and luckily there's good news. The official Twitter account released the future plans for Pocket. The trading feature will release soon, but also a new set will release at the end of this month. The first set was heavily focused around Generation 1, which makes many people believe the next set will be about Johto, and I have seen many concept cards floating around on their favorite Gen 2 Pokemon, which gave me an idea. I have created 30 concept cards that I would love to see in the next set release. From new mechanics to beautiful designs, these are my favorites. And a little disclaimer though, all the arts used in this video are official Pokemon artworks. Please do not just use other artists' work unless you have asked for permission, but for now, let's get into it. So let's have a look at all the water type Pokemon, and in this case it's Lantern. Lantern is an 110 HP stage 1 Pokemon. It has 2 moves because I'd love to see some more variety to cards that we have. It has first move is called Confuse Ray, which will make the opponent's Pokemon confused. Confusion is something we know is part of the game, but we haven't seen yet. And the second move is Aqua Spark. Aqua Spark does more damage if Lantern has a lightning energy attached as well. This maybe makes it particularly good for Dragonite decks, but it's also nice to see some cards that can use multiple energies instead of rely on one energy. The next card we'll go into is Totodile. Totodile, of course, basic Pokemon, 60 HP in this case, and has a move called Fury Strikes. Nothing special, it basically has the potential of doing 30 damage, but it has a fixed amount of coins to flip, unlike Eevee for example. This has basically a fixed damage max of 30 damage, but it can also do 0. But it gets more interesting when you look at the evolution. So Crocodile in this case is a very interesting Pokemon. It has 90 HP, but I gave it the move Sweeping Tail, which does 70 damage, but also will discard the top 2 cards of your deck. And this may seem like a thing you don't want to happen, but that is because you haven't seen the next card yet, which of course is Feraligatr. So now we see Feraligatr here with 2 moves. It has a simple move called Slash. This is an EX card by the way, and it has a second move called Surfing Strikes. Surfing Strikes basically does more damage the more cards you have in your discard pile. So this pairs very well Crocodile's card. In principle, the max cards you can have in this card pile is 20 because you have 20 cards in your deck, but Feraligatr is in here as well. Meaning you have a max damage potential around 220, but of course it will never really happen. But most likely will be somewhere between 100 and 200, which I think is fair. So now we go look at the last water card, which is Suicune EX. So I gave this card 2 moves, one ability, 1 move. First ability is Whirlpool. Whirlpool basically makes your opponent's retreat cost increase by 1, which I think is very interesting. It's something we haven't seen yet, but I would love to see added as well. And next we have a move called Cure Stream. So this move does 2 things. It does 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon, but also heals all of your Pokemon by 20 damage as well, which I think is very interesting and versatile Pokemon. So now let's have a look at all the grass Pokemon. And first up we have Sunflora. Maybe not the most favorite Pokemon, but I think it deserves a spot in set 2 as well. This Pokemon has a unique move called Solar Power, and what this move does is basically any of your next Pokemon's move, if it is a grass or fire type, will not cost any energy. And I think this pairs, for example, very well with like a Charizard deck or maybe Venusaur. It gives you basically potential to do something different, some new mechanics, which I think is quite exciting, and we don't really see much instead of coin flips, right? So this is something unique and new. And next we have Chikorita. Of course, I have to add all the starters in, and I gave Chikorita a very interesting move called Synthesis, which basically allows you to attach a grass energy to any of your benched Pokemon. So this one needs to be an active slot, of course, you need to attack with it, but then you can ramp up all your bench Pokemon, which I think is pretty interesting and maybe also has some use as a basic Pokemon for that matter. When we go look at its stage 1, Bayleaf, stage 1s don't get a lot of love, right? But in this case I gave it Soothing Scent, which makes it do 20 damage and will make the opponent's Pokemon fall asleep. I think at least this case the middle stage evolution has some use to it because Charmeleon, Ivysaur, Wartortle, they don't have much use, and I think in this case there's more potential. But then, of course, last we have Meganium EX. In this case it has an ability and a move. The ability Overgrow basically allows it to do more damage if Meganium's HP is 50 or below. This is something, of course, in the games exists as well. Overgrow is a common ability for Meganium, and of course also used in the TCG. I gave it the move Solar Beam, which does huge damage, but of course needs quite a bit of energy, and can do more damage, of course, with the ability, which makes it maybe a viable Pokemon, because Meganium doesn't get much love otherwise normally, right? So now we go into the next typing being Fire, and the first card for Fire is Magcargo. Again, maybe not a favorite for some people, but I really like Magcargo. Magcargo in this case has ability and a move, and I think some cards deserve to have abilities as well. And in this case it has ability Magma Armor, which makes it unable to fall asleep or be paralyzed, but it also has a move called Flame Burst, which does 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So instead of just one, you can attack 2 different bench Pokemon and do 30 damage to each of them, which I think is a unique move, and I would love to see more of these kind of mechanics as well. Up next we have again the starters, in this case Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil, not that special of a Pokemon case for this card. It has a move called Smokescreen, which is similar to Weezing's move in the Mythical Island. Basically what it does is that if your opponent attacks next turn, it has to flip a coin in order to determine if it can hit it or not. Basic Pokemon, but let's look at Quailava. Quailava has the move called Sinjin Fire. Sinjin Fire does 70 base damage, but it has a stipulation. You can choose to discard a fire energy from this Pokemon, and if you do, the opponent's defending Pokemon is now burned. I like having options in the game. You don't have to do it, but you can choose to do so, which I think is more fun. And this burn ability ties in very well with Typhlosion EX. Typhlosion, 150 HP, but also has the ability called Afterburner. What Afterburner does is when you attack a defending Pokemon, and if the defending Pokemon is burned, you can do 60 more damage. Together with its move Fire Spin, which does not do a lot of damage, only 100, this ties in very well. But what Fire Spin does is it removes a random energy both from Typhlosion, but also from the opponent's active Pokemon. And I think this makes it a bit more varied. It can be good in some cases, can be detrimental in others. And of course, last but not least, we have Entei. Of course, I have to include all the legendaries as well. Entei EX has an ability and a move. The ability is Extreme Speed. This is something that exists in the TCG as well. What it does is it reduces your retreat cost by 1 for each fire energy attached to your Pokemon. But I think the last resort attack that I created, which is not something in TCG, could potentially be fun to add. It's a 100 base damage, base power move, but if your opponent has 2 points already, this attack does more. So now let's have a look at all the lightning attacks, lightning cards. Lightning, first up we have Elekid, which has the ability Baby Evolution, which is something that exists in a regular TCG, but I adapted it to Pocket, where instead of automatically evolving it, you add the card to your hand, and then this has the move Thunder Spear, which then also allows you to do 10 damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon, being it the bench or the active Pokemon. And I think this is quite a fun move, it has a fun ability, it works quite well in Pocket, I feel like it's not too overpowered, and it's only 40 HP as well, right? But now let's have a look at the other electric cards, and this is Ampharos EX. Ampharos, again, most people really love this card, so do I, or this Pokemon, and has the ability Light Flash. Light Flash is where once during your turn you can choose to discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon, and if you do, the opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. Again, this is something where you can choose to do something, which is for me quite fun. It gives you more options, more things to play around with, more things to watch out for, and then has the move Thunder, which does more damage if the opponent Pokemon is weak to electric. And last but not least, we have Raikou EX, of course, the last legendary. In this case, it has the ability Fleet-Footed. Again, this is something from the TCG, where in this case, if you have, when you activate this ability, you can draw a card. And this ties in very well with the move I created called Electric Ball, where it does 30 base damage, but for each card in your hand, you do an additional 20 damage. And I think that's why it's, again, quite a fun new mechanic. You don't want to play too many cards in order to make Raikou stronger, but you need cards as well, right? So I think it's something that could be cool. Then next we have Psychic, and for first Psychic card, I added Xatu. Xatu, in this case, is an 80 HP stage 1 one, so not too much HP, but it has the move called Future Sight. Future Sight is basically a simple move, it does 60 damage, but it also acts like a hand scope, where you can reveal your opponent's hand. And I think hand scope is such a useful card, but it just, you don't want to waste a slot on it in your Pocket deck. But maybe by tying it in with a move, it could potentially be more interesting to use, because it's always good to know what your opponent has in their deck to play around it. And then next up, we have the EX card Slowking EX. So Slowking is of course something that's added in Gen 2, and in this case has an ability and a move. The ability Telekinesis allows you to look at the top card of your opponent's deck, and then you can choose to put it on the bottom. And I think this is a great ability. Again, it's something that also gives you some information on their deck, but you can maybe put their Gardevoir on the bottom when they're just waiting for the Gardevoir for the Mewtwo deck, right? So it gives you a fun new mechanic. And its move Psych Up, similar-ish, simple damage, but you can look at your top 3 cards and reorganize them. And what I like as well, if there is a potential to do split evolutions. So I also created a Slowbro EX. I know it's a Gen 1 Pokemon, but why not add it as well? In this case it has two moves, one is called Slack Off, where basically you heal 50 damage of this Pokemon, and the other is Laid Back Tackle, which does huge damage, but you can only use it once every 2 turns, meaning in the next turn you can only use Slack Off. So I think this is sort of a balanced way of creating a Pokemon, but you can also add one Slowbro and one Slowking to your deck and basically choose at the moment what is best for your play. So next we look at fighting, and first up we have Piloswine. Piloswine in this case has huge HP, or even though it's a stage 1 Pokemon, but it fits it quite well in my opinion, and it has the move Magnitude. Magnitude does more damage the more retreat cost the opponent's defending Pokemon has, which I think again is a unique mechanic, something could be fun to add. In this case, it can do a max of 20 plus 90, right? 110. I mean, Snorlax also exists with 4 retreat costs, but you don't see it often. So it has a max of 110, but most likely you'll do around 80. Which I think is fair. Then next up, of course, we have to add this one, Tyranitar EX. Huge HP with 2 moves. Cragalanche, which will discard the top card of your opponent's deck. And I think this might be overpowered in Pocket, because you only have 20 cards in your deck. And if your opponent then discards its evolution card, middle stage, whatever, it's sort of stuck, right? But I think it could be fun to play with discards in this game. And the next move is called Bulldozing Rampage, which does more damage for each mon on your bench that's damaged, which I think again is a unique fun mechanic to add. So the next typing is Dark, which is again one of my favorite typings, and of course I have to add Umbreon. Umbreon in this case is a stage 1 Pokemon with 100 HP, and it has the unique move called Payback. So this move does 60 damage normally, but if your opponent flipped a coin last turn, it will do additional 60 damage. And because there's so many coin flipping cards in this game, I think it's very good that we add something that counters all those coin flippers. Be it Celebi, whatever, I think it's good that we add something that can counter any coin flipping that's happening, which in this case Umbreon. And then next up we have Houndoom EX. Houndoom of course can be a fire type, but I made it a dark type in this case, and it has 2 moves. It has the move Snarl, which basically is like Golem's move, where you do 20 damage, but the next move by your opponent will do 80 damage less to you. So it's like a defensive move, and has a move called Daring Strike, which does normally 60 damage. Unless your opponent is an evolved Pokemon, then it does 130 damage total, which I think is fun. Again, new mechanics, I'm trying to add as many of these as I can, and I think this is a unique one. So next look at Steel. Steel is something that we don't have many cards of yet and hope to improve, and that's why I've added Skarmory with the ability Steel Coat. Basically, you can add any energy to this card and we'll treat it as a metal energy. Metal energy is, because we don't use metal cards that often, I think this is an ability that's quite useful, and also has the move called Steel Wing, which is similar again to Houndoom's move, where you do 40 damage, but you also take 40 less damage from next attacks, which I think is useful. It fits Skarmory very well, of course, as a Pokemon, and I think Steel Coat makes it add additional to any deck. And then we have Scissor EX. Of course, Scissor has to be added as well. Its 140 HP is not too high and has 2 moves. It has Steel Slash, which during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from EX Pokemon. So you can be attacked by any EX and it won't do any damage if you've used Steel Slash, which I think is unique and also makes people not rely on EX Pokemon too much, which I think should be a good bit of benefit. And then we have Punishing Scissors, which does more damage if the opponent has an ability. So next up we have Dragon. And the first card in Dragon is Dragology. We always have 2, I need to make 2 cards, and there's not many dragons in Gen 2 of course, so I added something from a later gen similar to Dradagon was added in Mythical Island. It has an ability Poison Point, which will poison the attacker, and has a move called Dragon Tail. Dragon Tail basically is similar to Grablock's move as well, where you force the active Pokemon back to the bench, but the opponent can choose whatever comes back in again. Again, it's not too overpowered as a Pokemon, it's a stage 1 anyways, but I think it's unique and quite fun. And I think we need more bench movers. And of course we have Kingdra as well. Kingdra could be a water type of course, but I made it a dragon type because otherwise we don't get any dragons next set. And has ability Deep Sea King, and this is a very strong ability. Basically what happens is that any Pokemon in your side gets knocked out, all the energy that's water or lightning can be moved to this Pokemon. And that's why it also has a move which needs 4 energies, specific ones, but does huge damage if you can make it happen. So this Kingdra fits very well in any water and combined electric deck. So next up we have Colorless, with first Pokemon being Porygon 2, with the move called Download and Magnitude. What Download does is basically it can copy any of your supporter cards that you discard. So you discard an Oak, and then you can use Download over and over again as an ability, and then you can basically copy Oak. It also has the move Magnitude, oh sorry, it should not be Magnitude, it should actually be Energy Beam or Energy something, which does 50 damage, but you'd have to discard the energy from this Pokemon. Again, not too strong of a move, but I think the ability can be super useful in many decks. And then for the EX Pokemon, I've created Noctowl EX, a very unique ability move. Not too high HP, but has the ability Talon Hunt. And that allows you basically to search for a specific card from your deck and add it to your hand. This makes Noctowl a valuable addition to any deck. It also has the move Night Raid, which basically does sort of the opposite to your opponent. You do very little damage, but you can choose one card from your opponent's hand and put it back in the deck, and then you shuffle it. So I think this is very unique. It works both ways, against your opponent, in favor of you, which makes it a lot of fun. But thank you guys for watching. These were all the cards that I created. Please create your own cards as well. But again, remember my disclaimer, don't just steal people's art. It's very important because they work hard on it. But for now, hopefully this A2 set releases soon. We have some exciting new cards, and maybe some of the mechanics I showed you are part of it. But for now, see ya!